Good morning, my friend. This colossal figure, measuring 67 feet, is a monument called a tribute to courage. This is Sam Houston. The city of Houston is named after him. Now, beyond his wildest imagination, Sam Houston never thought that the city of Houston would become a major powerhouse in the entire United States, if not the whole world. Houston is the home of the Texas Medical Center, the world's largest concentration of healthcare and research institutions, NASA, partly responsible for bringing the first man to the moon, and the Texas oil boom. I am guessing Sam Houston was doing what he thought was right then, not dreaming that his name would be forever associated with greatness. Wow. But listen, another person with no dream of becoming great also became great, far greater than Sam Houston. God so blessed him, greatly used him. And one of the reasons his life is recorded in the Bible is so that we can discover what God is looking for from simple individuals like you and me. So today, I will answer the question, what is God looking for? Can God use you? To find the answer, let's open our Bibles to Genesis 11 and 12. Now, are you ready for part 2? Now, to answer the question, what is God looking for? Or who is He gonna use? Let's first ask the question, who will God not use? Genesis 11 gives us a very clear idea. As explained thoroughly in the previous video, or part 1, chapter 11 recounts the Shemite people so blessed and used by God. How do we know they were blessed and used by God? Because instead of the gloomy coda, "and he died," every patriarch ends up with the sunny description, "and he had other sons and daughters." But wait, at the end of chapter 11, there's a fluke, an anomaly to the seemingly perfect chapter, because a Shemite descendant is described to have died for the very first time. In Genesis 11:28 says, Haran died in the presence of his father Terah, in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. Now, why did Haran die? Because Terah, his father, settled in the city of Ur. Now, what's the problem with that? Now, remember God's command in Genesis 9:1? It says, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." But instead of scattering to fill the earth, Terah decided to stay and settle in the city of Ur, and his son paid the price. As explained in part 1, Terah's problem is similar to the Babylonites. The Babylonites were settling instead of scattering, probably because of the safety in numbers and the comfort within their relatives and community. Now, after the death of his son, you would have thought that Terah learned his lesson by moving out of the city of Ur. Unfortunately, Genesis 11:31 says that after he moved out from Ur, he unfortunately settled again in another city. It says, Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son's Abraham's wife. And thankfully, they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But Unfortunately, when they came to Haran, they settled there. Despite his first lesson, I don't know what possessed him to settle again, but he did. Result? Genesis 11:32 says, and Terah died in Haran. Instead of experiencing divine favor, Terah ended up dead and not being used by God. Is it because he was tired of moving around? Or did he settle down because he prefers comfort in the familiar city, just like you and me? Or did he settle down because he will feel safe, surrounded by relatives and people he knew? Here is Terah's issue and our issue. You see, God's plan is never simple. It requires faith. It requires leaving what's comfortable and safe and diving into the unknown. No wonder Terah settled. No wonder we settle, because following God is costly. But on the other hand, following our own is more costly. Notice what Terah had to pay and what you and I have to pay. God did not use Terah, and he ended up dead. Is that what you want to be remembered by God? In short, the person God will not use is someone who settles for comfort and safety instead of surrendering to God. He follows his way, not God's way. Because in fairness, God's plan is never simple nor safe. But I am inviting you to try God's way and not your way and see the difference. Now, this brings us to the second point. Who then will God use? Do you want to know? Who will God use? Now, this question is answered by Terah's son, Abram or Abraham. Genesis 12:1 says, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. Did you notice that? God said, leave your safety net and surrender to me. Follow my not so simple plan. Have faith in me. Now, how did he respond? 3 words. Genesis 12:4 says, so Abram went. Wow. God uses and blesses those who start strong. Like Abraham, God will not tell you all the details when you start. So just start it despite the temptation to begin asking questions and more details. Remember, Abraham has all the reasons to say no. First, he is already 75 years old, ready to retire and be comfortable. But he prefers the unsafe plan of God rather than settling in his comfort zone. Secondly, he's comfortable with his relatives and his business partners. But he rather obey God rather than settling for his comfort. When Sam Houston defended Texans, he had all the reasons not to do so because his enemy, Santa Ana, had a more experienced, more professional, and more numerous Mexican army at San Jacinto. Many times, God uses people who won't follow conventional thinking, but people who rely on Him. So are you going to be used by God because even though God's way is costly, you will still follow Him? In short, Abraham started well. His faithful obedience brought God's blessings. However, starting well is good, but it's not enough. Abraham started well, but he stopped short in his obedience. His lack of trust stood in the way of fully experiencing divine blessings. Remember the 3 promises? He did not fully trust God in all of them. Now, there are 3 things he stopped short. First, he disbelieved the seed promised. How so? He took Lot with him, even though God promised him that he would become a great nation. Genesis 12:4 and 5 says, and Lot went with him. And Abraham took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son. He probably reasoned that since Sarai was barren, how could he have children? He doubted God's power. Second, he dismissed the land promised. Genesis 12:10 says, "Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down." You went down to Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was severe in the land. Wow, with the first sign of a problem, he backslid. And third, he disregarded the blessing promised by deceiving the Pharaoh. In Genesis chapter 12, 11 to 20, it describes how Abraham used deception by pretending to be Sarah's brother rather than her husband. But instead of bringing a blessing, he brought plague, all because of his lack of faith. He was almost sidetracked and disqualified because he stopped short. Why? Listen to this. Because obedience is tough. Obedience is hard. My friend, obedience is costly. But disobedience is catastrophic. Yes, obeying God, like Abraham, may cost you to leave your family, your comfort zone, and your security. But look at the alternative. Is disobedience to God's call a better alternative? Can you really afford to disobey God? Is it safe to disobey God? This leads us now to our application. Start well and finish well. That's our application. Start well and finish well. First of all, start well by trusting God even though He will not answer all the questions. Obey and trust Him to see you through even though you are against the norm. It will not be easy, but He will walk with you. Secondly, finish well by realizing that although obedience is costly, the alternative is catastrophic. Following God is costly, but following your own is more costly, catastrophically costly. If you follow God's voice, your friends in social media might cancel you because you don't follow their narrative, for example, about a particular sexual orientation. They might cancel you because you don't toe their line concerning your biblical view of a fetus and sexual purity and many other things. Now, how do you start well and finish well? Spend time with God's Word, not the world's word. Because at the end of the day, God's opinion rules the day. Is God worth a try? I invite you to try God. This is what Mosaic Church is all about. We invite you to give God a try. Now, the official name of this statue is A Tribute to Courage. Aptly named since Sam Houston demonstrated courage amidst seemingly insurmountable challenges. And after he defeated Santa Anna's superior army, he went on to become president of the Republic of Texas, and then governor of the state of Texas, and a U.S. senator. Now, just as this colossal monument still inspires Texans to reach lofty heights, will you be inspired to follow God's alternative? That's what Abraham did, a blessing missed by Terah and the Babylonites. Now, whose example are you gonna follow?